another question that people ask me as well, and how did you get so excited about Nightingale? What is it that makes it so that Nightingale became the passion that you are now living into? And that's another question that I love to answer, because it is literally a part of my own life story. I was a critical care nurse for 30 years, from the early 70s to the early 2000s. But about halfway through my career, I became more interested in global issues, more than worrying about how the kind of nursing I was providing at the bedside level. I was beginning to worry and think about the suffering of the world, and noticing that people are often sick because of conditions outside the hospital, that gang violence and all the social issues around gang violence, for instance, was a reason why this patient that was injured from a gunshot wound that I was looking after, was the reason why he was there in the hospital for me to see. So I began to see this larger societal, environmental, cultural issues like literacy and disease and hunger were issues that were keeping people sick and in the hospital. So roughly in the early 90s, that's when I began to say I wanted to learn more about all of that. And I moved to Washington, D.C., and then also I was in Ottawa, Canada, Canada's capital, for a long time, learning about how to be with people working at a global level. And during that time, I was using nursing shifts to pay for my explorations, for my adventures. And I thought at that point I was walking away from nursing, that I was only using nursing to help me get to a global level. And then in 1996, an amazing thing happened. My colleagues and I were working on a project where we were looking at the connections between health, education, and economics, and the environment, and all of the issues where health is connected in to all these other issues, and all these other issues impacting upon health. And we put together a project called Wellness Dynamics, and a friend said, well, why don't you just take that to the United Nations in February? There's a preparatory meeting for a summit in June in Istanbul. It would be great for you to be bringing this connections that you have brought. So we went to the United Nations in New York City, and that was actually my first time in New York, my first time at the UN. And one of the people who was at that presentation was a woman who said, well, this is so great. I want you to come to Istanbul and bring all of these connections with you and have many meetings during the summit to share these connections, because it's really relevant. All health connected to education, health connected to the environment, health connected to economics, for instance. So we went down to the coffee shop at the UN to say, well, now what would this look like? What meetings could we develop? What would it look like? And as it happened in the coffee shop, a then friend of mine, a man who much later, became my husband, Wayne Kynes, he happened to be at the UN for another meeting, and he came in at the coffee shop and he said, you know what you ought to do? I said, what? He said, did you know that Florence Nightingale began her work in Istanbul? And I said, she did? I had no idea. He said, what you should do is host an event at the barracks that's still standing in Istanbul, the barracks where she actually did her work for the Crimean War. Have an international tribute to Florence Nightingale at the United Nations Summit at the barracks called Scutari. And the woman planning this said, that's a great idea. Let's do it. And within 2 weeks, this was 96, within 2 weeks she had faxed confirmation that the barracks that is still a first Turkish army barracks, a military barracks, had decided that would be great and hosted us. Later in June, I was privileged to be there at the barracks hosting this meeting and bringing my thoughts to it. At that time, I knew nothing about Nightingale beyond that she had been at the Crimean War and was the lady with the lamp, and somehow had started modern nursing. That's all I knew. But in the course of the preparation for this event, I discovered this bigger, broader, phenomenal Nightingale that was taking health to global scale 100 years before in a phenomenal way. And it was because of that that I began to see that we could be bringing who she was to the world of nursing in the context of the 21st century. And I've been on that journey ever since. It's a very exciting journey, and it's something that just I still have so much passion for. And I hope you will too.